It's time to do another Michael Jackson video. Hey everyone, I'm Roxanne and welcome back to my channel. So Chris Rock's latest Netflix special makes some pretty unpopular mentions about the gloved one that a lot of people didn't like.
The thing I have a problem with is the selective outrage. That's right. Selective outrage. Everybody, you know what I'm talking about. One person does something, they get canceled. Somebody else does the exact same thing, nothing. You know what I'm talking about. You know, like the kind of people that play Michael Jackson songs, but won't play R. Kelly. Same crime. One of them just got better songs. That's right. Oh, I play starting something, it's a party. I play bump and grind, now you an activist.
The fact that R. Kelly has pretty much been canceled as a sexual predator of underage girls, also guilty of spousal abuse, but Michael Jackson seems to have been let off the hook. And Andy Signor and Steph the Alter Nerd from Popcorn Planet really seem to have a problem with Chris Rock coming after Michael.
His knock on Michael Jackson was just false. It was incorrect. It was a really bad example because it's just false. I support Chris and I'll defend him on the other stuff, but I can't defend him on this. Taj has an absolute point. I don't get why Chris keeps coming after Michael and keeps spreading this ignorance. It looks like he's practicing his own selective outrage, if we're being honest. So that really bugged me. I'm not a diehard Michael fan. I appreciate Michael, and Michael is innocent.
You know, okay, you girl, Michael Jackson, wasn't.
But I, for one, believe Jackson's accusers, unlike what seems to be the growing majority. So since the subject was brought up recently, I wanted to do a video on all the reasons why I think Jackson did the crime, but never served the time. So let's delve into some facts and past details on why I believe Wade Robson and James Safechuck, and why I think Jackson's 2005 acquittal was another miscarriage of justice. First of all, Robson and James Safechuck aren't the only persons who've accused Jackson of sexual abuse. Okay, you have Gavin Arvizo, who's the boy in the Martin Bashir Living with Michael Jackson documentary. You also have Jason Francia, who was the son of Michael Jackson's maid Blanca Francia. Then you have Michael Jacobshagen, who claims he met Michael Jackson in Munich on his history tour when he was only 12 years old. There's Terry George, who's a British property developer, who claims after he met Michael Jackson in 1979 at 13 years old, Jackson engaged in inappropriate phone conversations with him. And of course, you have Jordan Chandler, whose testimony to police is what started the initial 1993 investigation. So with regards to Wade Robson and James Safechuck, the argument against them is that they perjured themselves when they defended Michael Jackson when he was being investigated in 1993 and Robson again in 2005.
10-year-old Wade had slumber parties with Jackson, sleeping with him in the same bed.
Yeah, you know, there's been different times where it just be me and Michael. Then there'd be other times where he has other friends over too. It's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun. Because I know Michael well enough that he wouldn't do anything like that. I know that for a fact.
So since they lied then, they must be lying now.
They're liars. They're perjurers. They perjured themselves in a court of law during the previous case.
Well, wait a minute. If Robson and Safechuck committed perjury when they defended Michael Jackson, doesn't that then mean that he was guilty of these things and they were protecting him? I mean, they can't be lying in both instances. Either they were lying then or they're lying now. It can't be both. And okay, Robson and Safechuck defended Michael Jackson in 1993. You realize that would have made them ages 11 and 15 years old, respectively. I think it would be pretty easy to get an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old to lie for you. But people said, well, in 2005, Wade Robson was 23 years old. At 23 years old, you should be willing to tell the truth. Yeah, but by then, Wade had been the beneficiary of Jackson's money, influence, and connections. He was the main choreographer and creative director for both NSYNC and Britney Spears. Michael Jackson had been his mentor, teacher, and friend. He's the reason he left Australia and moved to the United States. Wade had a lot to lose, so surprise, surprise, he didn't want to upset the apple cart and rat out the person he could probably attribute the majority of his success to. Well, Michael Jackson was tried before a jury of his peers and found innocent, so why not just let the man rest in peace? But let's be real here, Jackson's not the only person in history who might have gotten an acquittal but could still have been guilty. Case in point, Casey Anthony, America's most hated mom, and O.J. Simpson, where the only difference between them and Jackson is that while the public were rooting for a conviction for Casey Anthony and O.J., in Jackson's case, everyone was rooting for an acquittal, refusing to believe that the man in the mirror could be capable of such a heinous crime. Actually, it's also interesting to note that O.J. Simpson's lawyer, Johnny Cochran, was on Jackson's defense team in 1993.
Michael Jackson has maintained his innocence from the beginning of this matter. The resolution of this case is in no way an admission of guilt by Michael Jackson.
And Tom Mesereau, who was Jackson's lead defense lawyer in 2005, was able to previously get rape charges dropped, which were against former heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson in 2001. But here's something interesting. Did you know that two of the jurors in Michael Jackson's 2005 trial, Eleanor Cook and Ray Haltman, told MSNBC they regretted their decision for an acquittal?
If I stay with my convictions, that I believe that Michael Jackson is a child molester and that he did in fact molest this accuser, then what's the next thing that could happen? Okay, you probably wind up with a hung jury. You wind up with a mistrial, whatever. With this kind of cloud hanging over your head, and you're thinking, I've spent 5 months of my life in this trial, and nobody's going to kick me off of this trial until it's over.
They also said the jury foreman, Paul Rodriguez, threatened to remove them from the jury if they didn't agree to acquit.
You say that you were threatened by the foreman. What did he say to you?
He said if I could not change my mind or go with the group or be more understanding, that he would have to notify the bailiff. The bailiff would notify the judge, and the judge would have me removed. I kept my position that I felt Michael was guilty. Okay, so then you have Jason Francia, who's the son of Blanca Francia, Jackson's maid, who worked for him between 1989 and 1991. Jason Francia said that when he was 10, Jackson sexually molested him on 3 occasions. At first, he denied that Jackson abused him, but during the 1993 investigation and during the 2005 trial, Francia said that Jackson tickled him and touched his genitals. Francia said, quote, "Every time I was being tickled, there was some sort of exchange of money. There was a sort of don't tell your mom understanding." His mother, Blanca, during the 2005 trial also testified that she saw Wade Robson and Michael Jackson together in the shower in Jackson's private bathroom and recognized the pairs of underwear on the floor as belonging to Jackson and Robson. Blanca also told authorities that she quit her job with Jackson after seeing him naked with young boys on a number of occasions. She told the Los Angeles Times, quote, "I quit in 1991. I was disgusted. I could not stay." Now, some have criticized Blanca Francia because it's alleged that she received around $20,000 to appear for the interview on hard copy. Quite frankly, in this whole sordid tale, a lot of money repeatedly exchanged hands, either in exchange for silence or to look the other way, or for book deals or TV appearances, depending on which side you were on. Another thing that might have influenced Blanca to only agree to an interview in exchange for a dollar amount was the fact that Blanca was an illegal immigrant from El Salvador and had a lot to lose if Jackson's team went after her. In my opinion, Jordan Chandler's father, Evan Chandler, was a complete opportunist who cared more about taking financial advantage of the situation than he did about the welfare of his own child. And with the phone call recorded between Evan Chandler and David Schwartz, it's really no wonder that everyone thought this was a complete extortion attempt on Evan Chandler's part.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. This attorney I found, I interviewed several, and I picked the nastiest son of a bitch I could find. Once I make that phone call, this guy is just going to destroy everybody in sight. Any devious, nasty, cruel way that he can do it. And I've given him full authority to do that. It'll be a massacre if I don't get what I want. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed. June is going to lose Jordy. She will have no right to ever see him again.
Yeah.
That's a fact, Dave. That's what's
Does that help?
Michael's career will be over.
Does that help Jordy?
Michael's career will be over.
And does that help Jordy?
That's irrelevant to me.
Anyway, after Jordan Chandler confessed to his father that Michael Jackson had molested him in August of 1993, Evan took Jordan to child psychiatrist Mathis Abrams, and over a 3-hour session, Jordan told Abrams that Jackson had sexually abused him for months and gave graphic detail of the events. Jordan then repeated the same account to the Los Angeles Department's Sexually Exploited Child Unit, and that's what kicked off the criminal investigation.
And one time he was masturbating, instead of masturbating with his mouth. And like if I didn't do it, then I didn't love him as much anymore.
Bill Dworin is a retired detective and expert on pedophilia with the Los Angeles Police Department, where he served for 34 years and investigated more than 4,000 sexual exploitation cases. And he was one of the lead detectives investigating the charges against Jackson.
You go into Mr. Jackson's bedroom. It's a very large room, a lot of stuffed animals, a lot of things that would be attractive to children. It wasn't a surprise because I went through many people's homes and found the same type of items, although on a lesser scale. One item that we found in a locked filing cabinet was a book showing nude boys in nude poses. It's not illegal. It's a book that I've seized in other investigations. If it's a person who has this material, who has a sexual interest in children, it becomes child erotica.
Dworin told Dateline that at the Neverland Ranch, quote, "We found books and the books depicted children in the nude. Pedophiles will frequently have this material available because they can obtain it legally. It's not illegal to possess." Interestingly enough, Michael Jacobs Hagen, who met Jackson in Munich on his history tour when he was 12 years old, says that Jackson had gifted him with a similar book of nude male boys, which Jackson had autographed for him.
There's a book called The Boy. This is a book with naked boys, completely naked boys inside. And this is what he gave it to me as a present. This was one of the pages here.
What does that say?
To Michael J., my friend, your rubber friend, MJ.
Corey Feldman also admitted in an interview that Jackson had also shown him a book of naked men and women with venereal diseases.
Were you ever shown any images that were inappropriate?
If you consider it inappropriate for a man to look at a book of naked pictures with a child that's 13 or 14 years old, then your answer would be yes. We went to his apartment and I noticed a book that he had out on his coffee table. The book contained pictures of grown men and women naked. And the book was focused on venereal diseases in the genitalia. And he sat down with me and he explained it to me. Showed me some different pictures and discussed what those meant. I was kind of grossed out by it. I didn't think of it as a big deal. I have to say that if my son was 13 years old and went to a man's apartment that was 35, and I knew that they were sitting down together talking about this, I would probably beat his ass.
But here's the kicker. Detective Dworin said Jordan Chandler was able to describe particular markings on Michael Jackson's penis when it was in an erect state. The Los Angeles Police Department was able to get a warrant to photograph Jackson's nude body, particularly his genital area.
I have been forced to submit to a dehumanizing and humiliating examination by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department and the Los Angeles Police Department earlier this week. They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my penis, my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted.
And Warren said the markings on the underside of Jackson's penis was identical to what Jordan described.
We corroborated what the boy has said, and we were able to corroborate that through the photograph of Mr. Jackson.
And this is the detective saying this. This is not someone with any personal vendetta with Michael Jackson or an underpaid staff member. This person doesn't have any dogs in this fight. This is just a police officer doing his job. This is also allegedly the evidence against Jackson that was the deciding factor in why Michael Jackson decided to settle with the Chandler family, and why he settled for such a high amount, coming to a total of $23 million.
Once he heard the evidence, Michael decided to end the ordeal. He paid Geordie Chandler and his family a massive settlement reported to be $25 million in exchange for their silence.
So was Evan Chandler an opportunistic extortionist? Yes, and the taped phone conversation confirmed this. So even with this against him, why did Michael Jackson agree to settle, and for such a high amount? This is why. Now on to Michael Jacobshagen, who claimed that he met Michael Jackson in 1992 in Munich while Jackson was on his Dangerous tour. After that, Jacobshagen said Jackson would continue to write to him with over 30 letters in total. Those letters culminated in an invitation for Jacobshagen to join Jackson on a leg of his History World Tour in about 1997. Jacobshagen said during this time there would be sleepovers where himself and another child would sleep in Jackson's bed.
First, it was just to sleeping, so sometimes sleeping also on other kids in the bed. It was not just me.
Later, Jacobshagen said in 1998 he spent his first night alone with Jackson.
I mean, we was together, our bodies was together. I was on this side and he was behind me, and he put his arm around me.
Pressed up against you?
Yes.
Was there ever anything sexual that happened between you?
The bodies together, you know? The bodies, that's why he also my rubber friend, you know? I mean...
What does that mean?
Rubber is that you put your two bodies together, you know?
As in rubbing up against each other?
Yes, this is exactly what is rubber.
Jacobshagen said things later escalated when Jackson was in a jacuzzi naked and asked the boy to join him. Jacobshagen refused, but will never forget the frightening experience.
Was Michael Jackson ever naked around you?
Yes, when we was in the jacuzzi.
He would fully strip off?
Yes. He was naked in the jacuzzi, and then he asked me also and say, you can do the same if you want. And I say to him, no, I don't want that. And he say, you can do it like me. Yeah, there's no problem.
The argument against Michael Jacobshagen is that he started making these allegations after the Leaving Neverland documentary was released. But I personally believe that in the same way the Me Too movement emboldened many female assault survivors to make their stories public, I think seeing Robson and Safechuck open up about their experience could have given Jacobshagen the courage he needed to make his allegations public. Terry George is a wealthy British property developer and claims to have met Jackson along with his brother Randy in a hotel in 1979 when George was 13 years old. Jackson was on tour in the UK with his brothers as the Jackson 5, and George said he was able to do an interview with him and the two swapped telephone numbers.
What is your name?
Michael Jackson.
And what is your job?
I'm a singer.
What do you like most? Things that you like?
I like kids a lot.
But a few months into their relationship, George alleged that on a phone call, Jackson asked the boy about masturbation and told him that he was pleasuring himself.
These words that we use that I didn't even know the meaning of then. Cream, basically. You know, something that I at that time thought was edible. You know, and turn out now to know it's something that's used for lubrication. At that time, it didn't mean a great deal to me. It was, you know, it was innocent conversation, really.
George said, quote, I could hear down the line he was making strange noises, and said the incident made him feel confused and uncomfortable.
He spoke about masturbation. About him masturbating. Did I masturbate? I never saw it coming. It wasn't something I expected. It just came out of the blue, really. He said, would you believe that I'm doing it now? And let me hear him on the telephone, I could hear it. And what did you think he meant by that? Well, I knew what he meant by that, because he was talking about it. He was talking about masturbation. I did feel uncomfortable. I can remember feeling uncomfortable. I felt awkward.
Let's move on to Gavin Arvizo. So Gavin Arvizo was a child cancer patient and was introduced to Michael Jackson at age 11 in the year 2000 through a mutual friend, Jamie Masada. Jackson and Arvizo became friends, and Jackson eventually invited the Arvizo family to the Neverland Ranch. Gavin also subsequently recovered from his cancer. But according to Arvizo, after a few visits to Neverland, Jackson stopped calling him and Gavin felt abandoned. Anyway, in 2002, Jackson invited Arvizo back to the Neverland Ranch to be a part of the Martin Bashir documentary, Living with Michael Jackson. But whatever innocence Jackson was trying to convey by having Gavin appear with him in the film completely backfired.
There was one night I stood in there, I asked him if I could stay in his bedroom, and he let me stay in the bedroom. And I was like, Michael, you can sleep on the bed. And he was like, no, you sleep on the bed, sleep on the bed. We're like, no, you sleep on the bed. And then he finally said, okay, if you love me, you sleep on the bed. I was like, oh man. And so I finally slept on the bed.
That was when people hear that children from other families have come and they've stayed in your house, they've stayed in your bedroom.
Well, very few.
But, some have. And they say, is that really appropriate for a man, a grown man, to be doing that? How do you respond to that?
I feel sorry for them because that's judging someone who wants to really help people. Why can't you share your bed? The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone. You know?
You really think that?
Yeah, of course.
You're taking the position that you use every single night that you go into. You sleep, and you're sharing it with another.
You say you can have my bed if you want. Sleep in it. I'll sleep on the floor. It's yours. Always give the best to the company,
The scene with Gavin leaning against Jackson and holding hands drew instant speculation and controversy. And there were calls for Jackson's children to be removed from his custody. A few weeks after the broadcast of the documentary in 2003, the Los Angeles Department of Child and Family Services conducted a preliminary investigation of Jackson and Arvizo.
You said that you want to show me how to masturbate. He wanted to show you how to masturbate. Okay. I said no. And he said, you do it for me. Okay. And did he do it for you? Go ahead, Kevin, it's fine. Put his hand in my pants. Did he put it on the outside? Inside? And what did he do next? He started masturbating.
Later that year in June, District Attorney Tom Sneddon, who launched investigations into Jackson in 1993 regarding Jordan Chandler, reopened the investigation and interviewed the Arvizo family. By November of 2003, Gavin Arvizo told police that Jackson had sexually molested him several times. With the authorization of a search warrant, the Los Angeles Police Department once again raided Jackson's Neverland Ranch. Jackson was arrested on November 20th and was released on a $3 million bond.
The felony complaint involves 9 counts. 7 counts of 288A in violation of California Penal Code, commonly known as child molestation, and 2 counts in violation of Penal Code Section 222 that involves administering an intoxicating liquor to a child for the purpose of committing a felony.
In the last few weeks, a large amount of ugly, malicious information has been released into the media about me. Apparently, this information was leaked through transcripts in a grand jury proceeding, where neither my lawyers nor I ever appeared. The information is disgusting and false. Years ago, I allowed a family to visit and spend some time at Neverland. Neverland is my home. I allowed this family into my home because they told me their son was ill with cancer and needed my help. Through the years, I have helped thousands of children who are ill or in distress. These events have caused a nightmare for my family, my children, and me. I never intend to place myself in so vulnerable a position ever again.
I love my community, and I have great faith in our justice system. Please keep an open mind and let me have my day in court. I deserve a fair trial like every other American citizen. I will be acquitted and vindicated when the truth is told. Thank you.
Unlike in the case of Jordan Chandler in 1993, California state laws had changed so that a defendant could no longer avoid a criminal trial for a molestation offense through a civil compromise. So in this case, Jackson would not be able to settle out of court and would be forced to go to trial. But Jackson's legal team, led by Tom Mesereau, put together an excellent defense and was able to establish reasonable doubt. Jackson was acquitted on all 14 charges. Now, I vaguely remember following the Jackson trial in 2005 and the controversy with Jordan Chandler in 1993, though I was only 12 at the time and most of the details about the case flew over my head. To be honest, for a long time, I believed Michael Jackson was innocent and was only being the target of these investigations because he was weird and eccentric. I wasn't a die-hard fan, but I did like his music. It was really the Leaving Neverland documentary that changed my mind. I didn't watch the documentary until a year after it came out because honestly, I knew it was going to be emotionally intense. But when I did bring myself to watch it, it completely changed my mind. For me, what made me believe Robson and Safechuck is really the level of detail and the amount of detail. It's very graphic, very explicit, and to me, it shows you what the dark reality is when it comes to child sexual abuse. It's disgusting, it's horrifying, and it's dirtily real. And this is abuse that allegedly happened over several years, so to have that amount of information, I don't see how someone could make that up and be able to be consistent and believable. Maybe you could make up 1 or 2 encounters or 1 or 2 incidents, but several years worth? I believe them. And it caused me to also look back at some of Jackson's behaviors and see some of the red flags that should have shown people that there was a problem. For one thing, first and foremost are the sleepovers.
You said in that documentary that many children have slept in your bedroom. You said,
Yes.
and I'm going to quote here, why can't you share your bed? The most loving thing to do is to share your bed with someone.
Yes.
As we sit here today, do you still think that it's acceptable to share your bed with children?
Of course. Of course, why not? If you're going to be a pedophile, if you're going to be Jack the Ripper, if you're going to be a murderer, it's not a good idea. That I'm not.
You're a parent. You've got 3 children.
Yes.
Would you allow your children to sleep in the bed with a grown man who was not a relative, or to sleep in the bedroom?
Sure. If I know that person, trust them, and love them. That's happened many times with me when I was little.
Do you know how this looks to a lot of people? I mean, do you understand that?
How does what look?
How the fact that you
know
would...
why people think sex. They're thinking sex. My mind doesn't run that way. When I see children, I see the face of God. That's why I love them so much. That's what I see.
Do you know any other man your age, a 45-year-old man, who shares his bedroom with children?
Of course. Not for sex. No, that's wrong.
I don't know any 45-year-old men who are not relatives of the children who share their bedroom with other children.
Well, what's wrong with sharing your bed?
But is it really appropriate for a 44-year-old man to share a bedroom with a child who is not related to him at all?
That's a beautiful thing.
That's not a worrying thing?
Why should it be worrying? Who's the criminal? Who's Jack the Ripper in the room? But I have slept in the bed with many children. I sleep in the bed with all of them. When Macaulay Culkin were little, Kieran Culkin would sleep on this side, Macaulay Culkin's on this side, his sister's in there. We're all just jamming the bed. And we wake up like dawn and go in a hot air balloon. I tuck them in. I put a little music on and do a little storytelling. I read a book. It's very sweet. Put the fireplace on, give them hot milk. You know, we have little cookies. It's very charming.
Truth be told, if this were any other grown man having sleepovers with little boys, we would never excuse this behavior. But because it's Michael Jackson and he's an artist and he's eccentric and he never had a childhood, we give him a pass. And I think that's not right. It's not right to say if it was anybody else, that would be a red flag, but because it's Michael, it's fine. Another argument being made is that instead of dissecting why Michael Jackson would have sleepovers with young children, the parents instead were the ones who were inappropriate by allowing their children to sleep in the same bed as Michael.
Now, do I believe Michael Jackson did some weird stuff? Yes, absolutely. Would I ever let my child have a sleepover with an adult? Never. It's never going to happen. And in fact, I don't know why we're not more angry at the parents.
But there's something a lot of people aren't getting here. These parents weren't your run-of-the-mill parents who made sure their kids were in bed by 8 because they had school in the morning. These were parents who were hopeful that their kids could break into the industry and were looking to Michael for his help and influence to give their child their big start.
Oh, you're casting a music video? Oh, my son, my daughter would be great. You know, I lived in Hollywood for many years, and when you look at those parents hoping against hope that their child is going to break through and make it, you can almost see how they would very nearly offer their children up.
What Di was telling me was that Jackson wasn't initiating these introductions to kids himself. It was the parents.
And for people who think that as a parent, they would never allow their child to sleep alone in a bedroom with a grown man, that may be true, but stage parents have always notoriously had a bad reputation, often overworking their children, putting them in compromising situations, and often having abusive relationships, such as in the case with Macaulay Culkin and Corey Feldman, who filed for emancipation from his parents at age 15.
Overworked by his father, Culkin filmed over a dozen films in just 3 or 4 years. Each role blended into the next, with Culkin missing out on some of the key years of his life. He wanted out.
How far would you go to encourage your son or daughter's desire for fame? Many parents, it seems, are willing to do anything that will enable their child to make it. And with no shortage of role models, from Shirley Temple to the Jonas Brothers, the financial rewards can be incredible.
By the way, Corey Feldman for years has been blowing the whistle on the rampant pedophilia that pervades the entertainment industry. And we know from characters like Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein that Hollywood and its associated industries is a corrupt place. So why would anyone think that Michael Jackson, with all the money and influence he had, was somehow immune to this corruption? No matter how endearing Jackson's public persona may have been to the public, none of his fans and supporters or anyone who wasn't in his inner circle can really say they knew him beyond what was put in front of us on stage or on TV. The man was a performer. I think this really shows the power of celebrity because, I mean, if you saw a 35-year-old man with a 13-year-old boy on his lap, no one would think that's okay. I mean, first of all, what are you doing with a 13-year-old sitting in your lap? This is not a young child. This is not a toddler. This is a young teenager. What are you doing with a 13-year-old teenager sitting in your lap? Like, how is this normal and okay?
He was sitting right next to the Prince of Monaco. It got very embarrassing. He was bouncing Geordie up and down on his lap. His nickname for the boy was Rubba, whispering Rubba, Rubba, Rubba. It was so embarrassing that one of Michael Jackson's aides went to him and said, you know, you really should have the boy go back to his seat in the row behind, but he wouldn't hear of it.
I said, stop. This is wrong. At the World Music Awards, the first time we went there and got 8 awards.
Now, to me, this video with Jackson and Jordan Chandler at the 1993 World Music Awards, personally, I think Jordan looks uncomfortable. He does not look like he's enjoying himself. He's singing along, and you know when you're not okay with something, but you're trying to look like you're okay, but really you're not okay. That's how Jordan Chandler looks to me. As a 13-year-old child, I would never be comfortable sitting on someone's lap, particularly a 35-year-old man. And of course, there's that scene with Gavin Arvizo and Michael Jackson in the Martin Bashir documentary where he's leaning up against him and looking up with these eyes and they're holding hands. Again, this might be normal behavior if this were a young child, like a toddler or even a 5-year-old. But this is a 13-year-old boy. This is a teenager. This is not normal behavior for someone that age. Also, people are saying Robson and Safechuck are lying because Macaulay Culkin and Jackson's nephew Taj Jackson said that when they slept over at Jackson's house, they never witnessed any sexually inappropriate behavior. And in any case, sleeping in Jackson's bedroom wasn't a big deal because his bedroom was quite large and was more like a play area than just a room with a bed.
What happened at the house? That's what all these things that people are concerned
that's what's
about.
so weird, you know.
What did happen?
Nothing happened, you know. I mean, nothing really. I mean, we played video games, you know. We played it as an amusement park.
But nobody can really say they have proof that Robson and Safechuck are lying because unless you were there in every instance Jackson and his accusers were together, you'll never really know what happened. Robson and Safechuck claim to have slept over in Jackson's bedroom several times, sometimes alone, sometimes with other children.
Yeah, you know, there's been different times where it'll just be me and Michael. Then there'll be other times where he has other friends over too. This is what Brett said, it's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun.
And Jackson himself has admitted to sleeping in the bed with children, namely Macaulay Culkin and one of his sisters. It also doesn't matter that Taj was in Jackson's bedroom at times because James Safechuck and Jordan Chandler also went on tour with Jackson, where they stayed in hotel rooms, and who was there to verify then that nothing happened? Safechuck said he was molested while on tour with Jackson and that his first experience of it was in Paris. Jordan Chandler was on tour with Jackson and said the molestation got out of hand in Monaco. Who can say with any kind of certainty that on these tours when Jackson took these boys with him, and there's photographic and video evidence he took these boys with him, that nothing happened? Unfortunately, for things like sexual abuse, especially child sexual abuse, it's one of those crimes done in secrecy where unless you really had hard evidence like videos or photos or a rape kit done immediately after the fact, you really will never have much more than a verbal testimony, and you really need much more than that to land a conviction. Which is why, according to statistics by the Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter, here in Canada only 1 in 9 cases of sexual assaults reported to police result in a conviction. Robson and Safechuck's allegations came out decades after the abuse had ended, so really none of us will ever know for sure, regardless of which side you're on. Now, there are a lot of weird things about Michael Jackson that you could say, well, that doesn't make him a pedophile, like his penchant for owning wax figures and other odds and ends he kept in his house. But it's time people call out the behaviors that wouldn't be acceptable if it was someone else, like his inappropriate relationships with little boys and those sleepovers. I mean, I've named 6 different men who've accused Michael Jackson of inappropriate and sexually abusive behaviors when they were children. Wade Robson, James Safechuck, Gavin Arvizo, Jordan Chandler, Michael Jacobs-Hagan, Jason Francia, and Terry George. Plus the testimony of a police detective who specialized in child sexual exploitation. But there were also multiple Neverland staffers who supported their claims and alleged that they witnessed Jackson's sexual indiscretions with children. Aside from Blanca Francia, Jackson's maid, and Jason Francia's mother, who claims she witnessed Jackson in the shower with Wade Robson, there's also Ralph Chacon, a former security guard who testified during the 2005 trial that he saw Jackson perform oral sex on a young boy aged 9 or 10 after Jackson and the boy bathed together in a jacuzzi at Neverland Ranch. Chacon said, quote, "I saw that Mr. Jackson was caressing the boy's hair. He also alleged that about a month later he saw Jackson kissing the same boy, putting his hand over the boy's crotch." But Jackson's defense team was able to chip away at Chacon's credibility, citing the wrongful termination lawsuit he filed against Jackson, in which Chacon hoped to make more than $16 million. Then there's Adrienne McManus, another former maid who, like Chacon, testified during the 2005 trial that she saw Jackson touching boys inappropriately, including Macaulay Culkin.
I noticed that there were a lot of little boys. That's all that would hang around there. You wouldn't see like little girls, and I knew the little boys were there. When they would arrive, they would put their clothes in a suitcase in his room. I started realizing, thinking, wondering, when he was taking baths with them, they were sleeping in his bed. I know the truth. I was there. And when I would go in the next day, there were little boys' underwears either on the floor with Michael's or they were in the jacuzzi.
The more Adrienne saw, the more convinced she was that Michael Jackson was a predator. A feeling she says was shared by other staff at Neverland.
But Culkin testified in court in Jackson's defense and maintained that Jackson never molested him. And Jackson's defense team also pointed out that McManus had also been part of the wrongful termination lawsuit filed against the singer, and both herself and Chacon were found guilty of stealing items from Jackson's home and accepting money in exchange for tabloid interviews. The next staffers were Felipe and Stella Lamarck, a French couple who cooked at Neverland for nearly a year. The couple claimed to have witnessed Jackson taking sexual advantage of young guests, specifically Macaulay Culkin. The Lamarcks described Jackson's regular routine of keeping the kids up all night with sound and light shows, games, and videos until they were so overstimulated that they wouldn't notice when Jackson would begin his abuse. During the 2005 trial, Felipe claimed that he witnessed one particular incident involving Macaulay Culkin when he was delivering French fries to Jackson's room at 3 a.m. in the morning. When he entered the bedroom, he saw Jackson and Culkin playing an arcade game with Jackson's hand down the young boy's underpants. Lamarck told the court, quote, "I was shocked. I almost dropped the French fries." However, the couple lost their credibility when it was found out they tried to sell their story to the National Enquirer. What I'm noticing a lot in this whole Michael Jackson sordid tale is that it seems like all the adults involved have dirty hands where either they've been paid to look the other way or they've tried to get some amount of monetary gain out of the scandal. And I think it's the kind of thing that's very characteristic of show business. It's a dirty industry. A dancer who was featured in the Thriller music video, who was at one point close friends with Jackson, Eddie Reynosa, told Vanity Fair, quote, "He's had little boys around for 9 years straight, 24 hours around the clock. People in show business couldn't understand how long it took to get the talk going. The public is 100 years behind on the allegations." Reynosa added that the people who were in Jackson's inner circle, quote, "looked the other way. They were afraid of being fired." Jackson's former business advisor, Myung-Ho Lee, told Vanity Fair, quote, "Michael is very vindictive. If anybody tries to do anything about him, if he has the upper hand, he will destroy you."
He was a manipulator, and I feel that anybody that came in contact with him, he destroyed them. They've been destroyed.
Now, a lot of people have said if the staff at Neverland had actually seen Michael sexually abusing children, why didn't they say something sooner? However, former staffers such as Adrienne McManus said she would regularly receive threats from Michael Jackson's security team and his bodyguards.
I was threatened. His bodyguards told me that if I ever came up on TV, that they could hire a hitman to take me out, slice my neck, would never find my body.
And you believed them?
Yeah, I did. I lived in fear for many, many years.
The security guards who are suing Jackson, claiming they were fired because of what they knew about the singer and young boys, are now accusing Michael's brother of being connected to a drive-by shooting aimed at one of the guards.
And former staff members who worked at the Neverland Ranch weren't the only ones to receive threats from Michael's team. Victor Gutierrez, an investigative journalist who reported on Jackson and published a book focusing on the singer's relationship with various boys, also fled the United States because he claimed Jackson's team was sending him death threats. Now, Neverland staff weren't the only ones willing to support the allegations made against Jackson. In 1993, Michael's own sister, LaToya Jackson, who was estranged from their family at the time, also spoke out against him, claiming Michael's mother, Katherine Jackson, had shown her checks Jackson had made out for millions of dollars to the parents of the boys Jackson would often entertain.
I must tell you that this is very difficult for me, that Michael is my brother. I love him a great deal, but I cannot and I will not be a silent collaborator of his crimes against small, innocent children. And if I remain silent, then that means that I feel the guilt and the humiliation that these children are feeling, and I think it's very wrong.
Okay, from your own eyes, you are now saying, testifying in a way, that you saw your brother with 8- and 9-year-olds in his bedroom staying over night after night after night. You saw that?
Yes, and not coming out of the room. But this
you
boy would
believe
totally change. You have to remember, he was just playful and just whatever. Then you come in the room and he's like this all of a sudden. I go, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Nothing. The same little boy that was jumping up and down on the bed and bouncing around and having fun and, oh, let's go to the candy store, let's do this and let's do that, was entirely different. You would see him sneaking there, looking around and running to the store after a while.
Why then are you so convinced in your heart that he's guilty?
Because of what I've seen, because of what I know, because of what my mother has done, because of what she showed me, because of the things that she said to me about Michael that I refused to believe at the time. I refused to believe my mother. My mother actually was screaming at me one day, and I ran to the room. I thought something was wrong, something had happened, and she was showing me this check. And I said, yes, so what about it? And she says, well, look at it. And the check, of course, was a 1 and lots of zeros behind it. And she says, Latoya, this is $1 million. I said, so? She goes, but look who it's written to. And of course, at that particular time, it was written to the last name of the little boy that he was with all that time. But it was written to the father and not the little boy. At that particular time, though, I told my mother, I said, Mother, you don't know why he wrote this check to him. Maybe they're having problems. I said, you have no idea. But she proceeded to call him a terrible name.
What was the terrible name?
She called him, excuse my expression, she called him an effing faggot. That's what she called him. And I said, Mother, don't say that. And she said, that's exactly what he is. He's always been that. And it makes you wonder, it made me think. But I didn't like when she said that, simply because I didn't believe that.
But basically, Latoya, you're drawing your own conclusion that Michael abused young men, young boys.
No, I'm not drawing my own conclusion that he abused young boys. That's totally wrong. I am not drawing my own conclusion. Let me ask you a question. What 35-year-old man do you know that sleeps with little boys and stays with them for a week or 2 weeks or whatever?
But years later, Latoya would recant her statements about the molestation allegations, claiming she was put up to speaking out against Michael by her abusive ex-husband, Jack Gordon.
Why did Jack Gordon want you to say that your brother was a pedophile?
He had this hatred towards my brother that I can never explain to you why it was.
Just to make things very clear, you recanted your accusation. Are you sure today that your brother never had any undue relationship with a child?
Barbara, Michael is not. He is not.
He is not a pedophile.
No, he's not.
However, Latoya continued to support the sexual abuse allegations even after her marriage to Gordon had ended. But given Latoya is no longer estranged from the Jackson family, and Jackson's team was in the habit of threatening people who spoke out against the singer, I'm not under any illusions as to why Latoya Jackson has recanted her story. The Jackson estate and his family has been fighting vigorously to quash the allegations made against the singer. Jackson was also the golden goose of his family and a highly prized corporate money-making machine, and so almost no one, including CEOs, business moguls, and the Jackson family themselves, were willing to speak out against the singer, who in the 90s was worth an estimated $150 million.
So, in the end, I've looked at 7 alleged victims, 5 Neverland staffers, a police detective, a former dancer, a business associate, and Jackson's own sister Latoya, who accused Michael Jackson of the sexual abuse of the young boys the megastar would surround himself with.
But the diehard fan is going to shoot every one of them down, which shows me that no matter what, and no matter how many witnesses or accusers there are, they are never going to believe that Michael Jackson may have been a pedophile. And it's not because there was no evidence or warning signs or red flags. It's simply because they don't want to believe it. Can I understand why though? Yes, I can. Michael Jackson is quite arguably the greatest performer and entertainer that ever lived. Besides his lyrical and creative genius, he represented something important to a lot of people. He basically embodies the American dream. Michael Jackson was a little boy growing up in a ghetto in Gary, Indiana, and rose to become the world's greatest and quite possibly last megastar. To me, he was a credit to the African American community, showing the wealth of talent and potential that lies in one of the most marginalized groups in North America. And of course, there was also the powerful messages in his music, like Heal the World, Man in the Mirror, and Earth Song, ballads about benevolence and love and humanity. Admitting that Michael Jackson may have been a pedophile in a way is letting all of that go and realizing that the image Michael Jackson represented was not the reality. As I said in a previous video, when I realized Jackson might have been guilty, it was very hard for me to let that go. And I'm not even a diehard fan. Anyway, what do you guys think? Was Oprah right to lend her platform to Robson and Safechuck? Are all of Jackson's accusers just out for money? What about the witnesses that support their stories, like Adrian McManus, Blanca Francia, and a number of other Neverland staff? Do you have any details about the Jackson investigations that I may have left out? Let me know in the comments below. And please, if you like this video and want to see more of my content, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one. Laters.